Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is me, Muhammad Farooq, lecturer, Department of English, Hyderabad University of Science and Technology. In today's video, I shall be talking about modernism and postmodernism. It is important to understand that we will have to make a binary opposition, that analysis of modernism and postmodernism in order to have clear and reliable understanding of these two literary movements. So, starting with modernism, it was a literary movement that started in English literature somewhere around in 1890 and it ended in 1940. This movement of modernism in the field of English literature was a kind of deliberate and radical shift from traditions. You know that writers from different uh, backgrounds, they in English literature, they started writing, that new things, and they started to write in a new way, and this was a kind of reconstruction, a kind of review, a kind of that re analysis of everything, of culture, politics, religion, gender, thoughts, philosophy, and each and everything. I mean, writers, they started questioning to everything, and this new trend of questioning to everything, and this new trend of writing new things in a new way, that is what modernism in the field of English literature. So we see that this literary movement of modernism has a number of features, a number of characteristics to be analyzed. But in today's lecture, I am going to talk about two of them. The one thing that it is highly deviated way of writing, and in this particular context, the modern writers, particularly James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, D.H. Lawrence, T.S. Eliot, they started to write in a new technique, and that new technique is known to be stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness is a narrative technique in which characters and events are constructed in a way that is not in chronological sequence, rather they are in a jumbled way, and ideas, there is discontinuity, and if writer is talking about one thing, then suddenly he will be talking about other thing, and then shall come back to the former idea. So this is the way. Somewhere Virginia Woolf says that life is not symmetrically arranged. Life is not in sequence, and so is the case with modern writers, and so is the case with their writing. And we see that this stream of consciousness term was for the first time used by James Joyce in his book Principle of Psychology, that was published somewhere around uh, 1890. And we see that uh, passages are constructed in a that disordered way, and there is the use of free verse instead of following certain rules of writing, and further writers, they keep on using frequent references in their writing. For example, the work of T.S. Eliot is full of allusions, full of references, which are taken from other classical works of literature, from Shakespeare and so on and so forth. Then we see that in Thomas, this is what all about the style of writing. And then there is the loose construction of the plots, for example, in novels. Earlier novels, they have comparatively stronger and well netted plots, but modern novels, they have loose plot, and there is excessive use of imagery, and description, and there is less external action and more internal and psychological action. For example, the story of novel Virginia Woolf uh, much focuses on the internal trauma and thoughts of character. Similarly, uh, for example, D.H. Lawrence writing particularly one of his stories, The Fox, that focuses on that the internal uh, and the mental condition of the characters. This is one thing. So far, thematic level of modern writing is concerned, modern writing also deviates in terms of themes and thoughts and message that writers they convey to readers. And the very first thing is that it focuses on the theme of pessimism. And this theme of pessimism is that the result of two great world war in uh, modern time. The first world war fought between 1940 up to 1919, and the second world war fought between 1939 to 1945, I think. So these two great wars, they had that very terrible influences and impact on human psychology. People they started thinking that life is meaningless because there was a huge destruction, and that it was a kind of disaster for humanity all over the world. And that's the reason we see a new school of thought in the field of literature in this age, that is known to be absurd school of thought. The people, writers who focused on the miserable condition of that time, and they started depicting and presenting the life on the earth as a meaningless, in the form of absurdism, absurd school of thought. And the best example can be taken of play Waiting for Godot, written by Samuel Beckett. So we see that uh, this, sorry, not Samuel Beckett, rather by T.S. Eliot. And this is the example of absurd school of thought. Then, on the level of theme, another thing we find that there is deviated construction of almost everything. For example, in terms of gender, if we talk, then the writing of D.H. Lawrence is full of deviated way of construction of gender. Uh, Traditional concept of gender is homosexuality, that is, that binary opposition system, and uh, he is seen propagating the concept of homosexuality in his, that novels, such as in Sun and Lovers, The Rambo, in his short story The Fox, and so on and so forth. And beside this, we see that there is the theme of colonization, that in this age, stronger powers and countries they started ruling weaker nations all over the world, and hence we see that this practice of colonization for the sake of exploitation and marginalization of those subject class is that hot topic debate for these modern writers. And we see a novel, Heart of Darkness, written by Joseph Conrad, that focuses on this practice of exploitation of people in Africa by British, and they are being uh, subjugated on the name of commerce, on the name of trade, on the name of civilization, particularly, and on the name of Christianity. But the protagonist, namely Kurtz, in the play, in the novel, forgets this all these things, and he starts, that exploiting the local people, and so on and so forth. Then we have the theme of In modern literature, we also see the influence of science. This was the age of sense and sensibility. It was the age of enlightenment that focused on reason, and hence that we see that modern writing is, that lacking the element of emotions, feelings, and passion, and so on and so forth. That's the reason the definition of poetry given by T.S. Eliot can be best example taken in this particular context, that poetry is not turning loose in emotion, rather an escape of emotion. So this is what it's a kind of that reaction against the romantic school of thought. Romantic school of thought earlier focused on imagination, emotions, and musicality in writing, and they started giving a kind of emotional interpretation to human life, and hence these modern writers, they started giving rational interpretation of human life in their writings. There was the concept of objective truth being, that rational and age of sense and sensibility writers, they focused on objective truth, the universal truth, and they, that made fun of subjectivity, and they discouraged the subjectivity of human thought and feelings, and so on and so forth. So, and similarly, we see in respect of grand narratives, we see uh, the movement of structuralism that focused on the structure of the text. That if you want to explore the meaning of the text, you will have to analyze the overall structure of the text. And binary opposition system was introduced, that meaning lies in difference. Why one thing is uh, one thing because it's not the other thing, why a pen is pen because it's not hen, and so on and so forth. So this is also, it is also really, that helpful in understanding the ideas, that we understand one thing in contrast to other thing. So this was what all about modernism. So far postmodernism is concerned, it is a kind of reaction against the movement of modernism. It started in 20th century in literature, and it that questioned everything that was that was argued by modernism. For example, it rejects the concept of rationality. It does not base on human reason and science. Rather, it gives subjectivity to human thoughts, and it argues that everything is relative and everything is definable and changeable. There is nothing. There is nothing fixed in this world. The very first idea in postmodernism is skepticism, and skepticism is that a philosophical school of thought that questions the certainty of knowledge. This is the very first point, that it questions the certainty of knowledge, that what do you say is not certain, and who can define or that fix this truth. There is no objective truth at all. What do you think is a right may be wrong for other person, and what do you think is a wrong may be quite right for other person. So it does mean that the things are not, that good and bad and right and wrong in their nature. Rather, they are constructed as a good and bad, right and wrong by people. So if they are constructed in this way, so it means that there is no objectivity at all, because the things they are varying among people, and this variety of things is basically that telling us that there is no fixed identity, there is no fixed knowledge, there is no certain statement, so on and so forth. Then as we see that a grand narrative in uh, modernism in the form of structuralism Postmodernism rejects this concept of structuralism, and it argues that meaning is not fixed anywhere, and it is in moving form, and that it cannot be located in one particular thing. And similarly, it also rejects the concept of binary opposition, that this is a kind of established, that concept of things, that there is man and women, and there is a girl and boy, and they, that, like this. So this concept of binary opposition, that is locating the things on a one particular fixed point, and that is against the feature of postmodernism, while it argues that there is no fixed meaning at all. For example, the concept of modern people, they don't claim the crisis of identity. They are, that equal citizen of the whole world, and they are globalized citizen, and they feel at home in the entire world. And that similarly, they don't believe in nationalism. They don't believe in the strict construction of the culture, and so on. So further, postmodernism also questions the concept of universalism, that some of the standard they have been set by people, and they are termed as a universal standard, and this universality is, that openly attacked by postmodernism, that there is nothing absolute, nothing universal, nothing standard, and so on and so forth. So objective truth has no meaning in postmodern world, and similarly, there is no concept of morality, because there is no objective good and bad. There is no concept of right and wrong. Rather, the things are working in some hierarchical way. They are being, that used as a power, and discourse analysis can be helpful in order to understand the things, that why certain standards are set in order to exercise power. Is Michael Foucault is talking about disciplinary power, that it is working in the form of discipline, and that the things which are apparently uh, that shown as a welfare for people, they are basically for the achievement of personal ambition. Postmodernism also propagates the concept of deconstructionism, as constructionism is propagated in modernism. It argues that if something is constructed in the form of literary work or idea, that is to be deconstructed and new meaning can be achieved. And further, that particular constructed idea can be further deconstructed. So it means that there is no absolute meaning at all in the text. Rather, it depends upon, that people and reader, they can derive meaning from text time. And if we sum up postmodernism, it propagates the relativism, it propagates pluralism, it propagates globalization, it propagates cosmopolitanism, and it is a kind of reaction against all those features of modern. I hope that this lecture shall be helpful for students, and we shall be making discussion according to the course content in preceding videos. Thank you so much.